On 1941, 3 million German soldiers pour across the Soviet border in the largest invasion in human history, Operation Barbarossa. In our world, it was the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. But what if it hadn't been? What if the Wehrmacht had taken Moscow before winter? What if the Soviet Union had collapsed in 1942? What kind of world would we be living in today? This is the story of the 1,000-year Reich, the world that never was, but easily could have been. To understand how close the world came to a different outcome, we need to remember how the real war ended. By early 1945, Germany was being crushed from both sides. The Soviets pushed west through Eastern Europe. The Americans and British advanced from the west. Hitler's decisions invading the Soviet Union, declaring war on the United States, the Holocaust consuming resources and manpower, had sealed the Reich's fate. On May 8, 1945, Germany surrendered unconditionally. The Allies divided Europe. A new world order emerged, messy, imperfect, but free. But none of that was inevitable. The war could have gone the other way at multiple critical moments. The divergence point we'll explore is Operation Barbarossa, but with one critical difference. In our timeline, Hitler diverted forces south toward Ukraine in the summer of 1941, delaying the push on Moscow. In this alternate timeline, he doesn't. The Wehrmacht maintains its northern thrust. Panzer divisions reach the outskirts of Moscow by October. The Soviet government evacuates east. By December, the city falls. Without Moscow as a logistical hub, Soviet resistance fractures. By spring 1942, Stalin's regime collapses into regional warlords. The war in the East is over, and with it, the trajectory of the entire century changes. With the Soviet Union defeated, Hitler turns his attention west. Britain, already war-weary and now standing alone, faces an impossible choice: fight on against a continental superpower or negotiate. Churchill refuses. He's removed in a parliamentary coup, replaced by a faction willing to accept a peace deal. By mid-1946, Britain signs the London Accord. Germany keeps Europe. Britain keeps its empire for now. The swastika flies from Paris to Prague, from Oslo to Athens. Albert Speer's vision of Germania, a rebuilt Berlin as the world's capital, begins construction. Millions of forced laborers reshape the city into a monument to Nazi power. Meanwhile, the United States, shaken by the loss of its European allies, turns inward. The Manhattan Project still produces atomic weapons, but without a European front to deploy them, America's bomb becomes a deterrent, not a tool of liberation. The Cold War begins, not between the US and the Soviet Union, but between the United States and the Third Reich. By the mid-1950s, the world has settled into an uneasy equilibrium. Two superpowers face each other across the Atlantic: the American-led free world and the Nazi-dominated European bloc. Germany's nuclear program, accelerated by captured French and Czech scientists, produces its first test in 1952. The deterrence balance holds. Neither side can afford to strike. But beneath the surface of Nazi order, resistance simmers. In the occupied territories, France, Poland, the Low Countries, underground networks persist. They receive covert American support through a secret CIA program. In 1961, the French resistance stages a massive, coordinated uprising across Paris. It's crushed within weeks. The reprisals are brutal, 10,000 executed. But the message is clear: the Reich is not unchallenged. Technology, meanwhile, diverges dramatically from our timeline. Without the post-war cooperation that gave us the European Union, without the Marshall Plan, without the democratic exchange of ideas, German innovation is powerful but narrow, focused on military dominance, rocketry, and control. They reached the moon in 1964, planting a swastika flag on the lunar surface. But there's no civilian space program, no internet, no open scientific community. The Reich builds walls, literal and metaphorical. By the 1970s, the 1,000-year Reich is showing its age. The generation that built it is dying. The generation that inherited it is restless. Hitler died in 1962, succeeded by a rotating council of military and party officials who spend more time fighting each other than maintaining control. The economy, built on conquest and exploitation, stagnates. The occupied territories drain resources. The slave labor system, rebranded as voluntary work programs, produces resentment and sabotage. In Poland, a solidarity-like movement emerges in 1978. This time, it's the Catholic Church that becomes the organizing force. The Pope, a Polish exile, broadcasts coded messages of resistance through Vatican radio. Meanwhile, America has its own revolution, not violent, but transformative. The Civil Rights Movement, which in our timeline achieved landmark legislation in the 1960s, is delayed here, but it happens. By 1975, a charismatic American president, a former civil rights leader, takes office on a platform of moral clarity. The free world must confront the Reich, not with bombs but with truth. He begins broadcasting into Europe on shortwave radio. The signal penetrates the Reich's information wall. For the first time, millions of Europeans hear an alternative narrative. By the 1990s, the Reich is hollow. The ideology that once mobilized millions is now performative, a ritual observed out of fear, not belief. Young Germans consume forbidden American music and films through smuggled cassettes. A generation gap widens between those who remember the founding and those who inherit its consequences. In 1991, Poland erupts. This time, the resistance is too large to crush. The Vatican throws its full weight behind the movement. One by one, the occupied nations begin to break away not through war, but through sheer, exhausted refusal to comply. The Reich doesn't fall in a dramatic moment, it crumbles. By 2025, the world is unrecognizable compared to our own. There is no European Union, no United Nations in the form we know it, no internet, or rather, a military-controlled network that never opened to civilians. Technology exists, but it serves power, not people. Democracy survives in America, in parts of South America, in Australia and Japan. But half the world lives under authoritarian systems that trace their lineage directly to 1945. The human cost is immeasurable, not just in lives lost, but in ideas never born, art never created, futures never imagined. The 1,000-year Reich lasted less than 15 years in our world. In this one, it might have lasted generations. But the story isn't really about what could have gone wrong. It's about what went right and how fragile that was. The soldiers who stormed Normandy, the resistance fighters who risked everything, the leaders who chose alliance over isolation, they didn't just win a war. They preserved the possibility of a better world. A world that isn't perfect, but a world where the question, what if the Nazis won, remains exactly that, a question, not a reality.